to share our knowledge to all teachers of literacy for all types of learners. We are launching a series of lectures called Red Flags and Green Lights, Understanding Reading Difficulties and What We Can Do to Help Them. This will all be happening in all Saturdays of August and 2 Saturdays of September. They are free, and we are inviting everybody who are interested in helping kids read better. Again, I am Victor Villanueva, or Teacher Vic, and I am advocating for literacy for all types of learners.
our webinar. And then the other questions that will be asked, maybe Ms. Kiana can address them to via.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Welcome to the Chorus webinar series. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can
Yes.
teach.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes, teacher Ed.
Welcome to the Chorus webinar series, Red Flags and Green Lights, Signs of Reading Difficulties and What to Do About Them. For all Saturdays of August and the first 2 Saturdays of September, Chorus will sponsor free webinar lectures focusing on reading intervention. I am Teacher Red, and I am a founding member of the Council of Reading Intervention Specialists, or CORIS. Today is the first of 7 sessions. The first topic is entitled Reading Development and its Challenges, Understanding Why Some Students Have Difficulties. We welcome all of you here in Zoom and also those who are watching us via Facebook Live. Thank you for your overwhelming response. To begin our session, we will quickly go through some webinar reminders. Let's highlight the interface features of Zoom that we will need and some guidelines for this session. For Zoom participants, please use your full name as your official Zoom name throughout this webinar. If you need to change it now, you may click on the participants icon and find your current Zoom name. Hover over your name and right-click to rename. During the session, we would like to request everyone to turn their videos off. By default, we will be putting participants' audio on mute during the lecture part of this session. Please turn on your video during the question and answer portion, as this allows our speaker to engage better with the participants. You may turn on your video by pressing the Share Video button at the bottom left side of the Zoom interface. Okay, everyone's video is on right now. During the dialogue and Q&A portion, the reciting participant may turn on his or her video and the mic on. You may ask your questions anytime during the session by typing them down on the chat button found at the bottom right-hand corner of the Zoom screen. Chat box questions will be collated by the organizers. Okay, for those who are in Zoom, can you all type hello in the chat box? We're good? Teacher Fides? Teacher Tin?
Yes, we are.
Thank you. For private questions or comments, kindly send them to our facilitators, Christine Asas or Fides Mendoza. You may change the name on the chat box for a private chat. For those on Facebook, a lot of watch parties may be happening in Facebook right now. If you have questions, please do not comment on the FB page of the private individual or page that shared this live viewing with you. Instead, type your questions on the main FB page of CORIS. We will try to answer as many questions as our time would allow us. Some reminders during the question and answer session. Please ask questions related to the topic discussed. If you would like to engage with our speakers on personal matters or do a formal consult, we will be providing their contact details later. Please keep your questions brief and direct to the point to give other participants a chance to ask our reading specialist. We will try our best to end the session promptly at 6 o'clock. Certificates. Certificates will be given to registered participants and those who received the Zoom link. If you were unable to enter the Zoom meeting on the day of the webinar due to technical concerns, please watch via FB Live and you can still claim your certificate. Certificates will be issued 1 week after this webinar. We will roll out a new registration link after today's session. We have limited Zoom slots, so please register before it closes. Only those who have registered will receive a certificate of attendance. But all our lectures in this CORIS webinar series will also be live on Facebook. Thank you and have fun learning. Since this is our first ever webinar by Chorus, I'd like to introduce all of you to our members and talk a little bit about Chorus. Even superheroes need to work together. Although reading specialists can work alone, it is also good for any professional to engage and connect with peers for professional growth, accountability, and camaraderie. This is our mission: to promote the highest professional and ethical standards for reading intervention towards the welfare of learners with difficulties in language and literacy learning. What have we done so far? We have registered Chorus with SEC and BIR. We have gathered 2 times a year to share best practices since 2016. We have also sponsored major professional development seminars. What are we doing now? We are standardizing our practice. We are documenting our knowledge. We are preparing to open Chorus for membership. Who are currently in Chorus? These are the founding members of Chorus: Iloilo Reading Intervention and Assessment Center, the Literacy Ladder, LitCore, Reading Specialists, Read Plus, Teacher-Read Educational Therapy Services, Teacher Teen, the Resource Room Cebu, Word Prime Reading Lab, and of course, our founder, Teacher Vic. Our founder, Teacher Vic, is our lecturer for today. He is the current Chorus president. He is a former executive director of Word Lab School, former faculty of Reading Education Area at the UP College of Education, and former president of the Reading Association of the Philippines. And here's more about our founder and our speaker for today, Victor A. Villanueva. Teacher Vic studied for many years to become a teacher. He teaches reading to children, parents, and teachers. With his wife, Aleta, he opened a school for building ideas. He also works with institutions that have a lot to do with children, teachers, and books. When there is time left, he reads his favorites and watches movies on Netflix with his family. He also does serious CrossFit workouts 3 times a week. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our founder and speaker for today, Teacher Vic.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Welcome on this very cold day, very rainy day. I'm very happy to be here to be the first speaker for this lecture series. And yeah, we thought about doing this because our situation is difficult. Our schools are closed. Our children are at home. They are coping. They're struggling with a lot of reading. And among all those students who are learning at home are many students who are struggling with reading. There has been a lot of talk about the new normal. So that's a catch or a buzzword. And in this new normal, let us not forget the old normal. And part of the old normal would be the needs of students who have difficulties learning to read. Despite the pandemic, despite the movement towards delivering education online, the needs of these students are the same. These are students who are struggling with reading, and then for them to be able to become successful, we really need as teachers to be more understanding of their condition, and then be more industrious, be more diligent in finding ways for them to read better. Especially now, since a lot of demand would be on independent learning. So that independent learning, a lot of that will be accounted for independent reading. So if you have a reading difficulty, that makes your learning at home or online more difficult. So, so this lecture series, what we hope to happen is that we put the needs of these students at the forefront of our thinking. as teachers, as we plan for our lessons, as we deliver instruction in whatever format, will it be modular or direct online, synchronous learning, we need to put the needs of students who may have difficulty at the forefront of our thinking so that we can provide provisions. No? Can we have make provisions available for these learners? And then with that, I will begin. I will be sharing my presentation with you. Okay. All right. So it is not by accident that I have chosen the oldest framework to understanding literacy development. This learning framework is indeed very old, but its relevance has not changed over the many decades since it has been um, brought forth the community of reading teachers. So I will begin our lecture series by talking about the developmental aspects of literacy learning. So in this presentation, what I will try to do is to provide everyone a context for understanding a reading difficulty that is often viewed in isolation of many things. So to remove that tendency for isolating ideas and for isolating conditions, I will situate our effort to understand reading difficulties with the broadest um, context, and that is the lifespan of all individuals, of all children. So by doing so, we need, my hope is for teachers to think of a child that you're working with, to think of this child's difficulties, and to think of those difficulties in the context of where the child is in terms of the developmental span. So I only have, it's a very simple presentation. I will try to talk about the stages of reading development that was specifically formulated for us to gain this understanding of children's needs, the teacher's expectations, and also of reading development, and then to look at it together with our main concern for this series, which is the struggling readers. So I will weave them together, these two objectives for this session. I will try to weave building that understanding of the stages of reading development, and also how will this framework, how will this approach to understanding help us have a clearer view of the struggle of struggling readers. Okay, so this framework or this idea was developed by Dr. Jean Scholl. At the time, she was the dean of the graduate school of Harvard University. And then she based this idea also on the work of Jean Piaget, who thought about and formulated the developmental span that happens in children as they grow up from childhood to adulthood. And then the importance of this frame of mind is to see that that learning takes time, and also that knowledge builds on each other. So having this frame of mind will help us manage our expectations and then be more certain and be more specific about how we describe a difficulty, and also how we attempt to solve, if that is the proper word, or to mitigate the effects of a learning condition on literacy learning. All right, so Jean Scholl proposed 6 stages of reading development, and then she begins with 0 and ends with 5. If you have worked with somebody who is involved in events organizing, you would be familiar with the idea of stage 0. So stage 0, it is the stage wherein preparations are made before the actual activity begins. So Jean Scholl approached the idea of literacy development from 0, moving into 1. Stage 0 is pseudo reading. And then for us who are, familiar with affixes, that pseudo means fake. And then reading, so this tells us this is fake reading. So how is this important? And then later I will discuss that this is very important. And then from pseudo reading, we move towards stage 1, which is initial reading and decoding. It is when we begin with stage 1 that we start looking at literacy learning as a formal skill. When you say formal skill, it is a skill that has to be systematically taught and systematically learned and formally learned in school. So stage 1 begins there. It moves to several other stages until we reach the pinnacle of reading development, which is construction and reconstruction. So it is at stage 5 where all of us must be in. Okay, and then more of that characterization when the time comes that we focus on this stage. So these are the stages. Now, what I will be proposing for this lecture is for us to think of all these different stages, that when we think of a child, we think of where is the child in terms of the developmental stages. So that's very important. What is also important in this presentation, as we talk about children who struggle, would be the spaces in between stages. The spaces wherein a child transitions from an earlier stage of development towards a later stage in development. And then when we look at these stages in light of understanding reading difficulties of children, we should not only be thinking in a linear, unidirectional way, from 0 to 5. We have these stages of development. We can write it down on paper. And then when we think of a child, we situate where the child is. And then we also need to be able to go back and forth. We can go forward, we can go backwards in our attempt to understand the nature of the difficulty of a child. So that is my introduction for this for these stages. And then the next thing that I will do is to really talk about the individual stages and then talk about the transition between stages as our attempt to understand reading difficulties better. All right. So again, Jean Scholl, in her wisdom, began talking about the stages of reading development by identifying a stage 0. So if we look at stage 0, we might think that nothing is happening because it's 0, but that is contrary to the truth. Okay, a lot of things happen at stage 0, and stage 0 begins at around 6 months to 6 years. So it's a very long time. And then imagine children from as young as 6 months old to as old as 6 years old, and all that span of years. What is happening to this child at this point that is relevant for their literacy learning? Okay. All right. So imagine, so the child is at home, the child with his parents or his caregivers or his mother or his father, and then that child must be learning a lot of things, a lot of knowledge that will later be very significant for literacy development. So what are those things that a child learns at home? A child learns to talk, a child learns to listen, a child learns to have conversations with people, a child learns to use language to name things, to name actions. And then if the child is growing up in a print-rich environment, this child will also be learning things like you pick up a book
And then when you read something funny, you laugh. Or when you need to remember something, you pick up a piece of paper, write it down, bring it to the grocery, and then that list guides you as you pick up the things that you need. So all of these knowledge, all of this literacy knowledge are knowledge that the child finds relevant, especially if the child is involved in it. And then the child lives through that experience of using these literacy um, activities meaningfully. And then when all of these conditions are rich and all of them are available, the child develops all this pre-literacy knowledge that eventually will be the building blocks of learning to read formally in succeeding stages. So what would be the highlights of this stage 0? Children at this stage will be pretending to read. So this pretending to read is a powerful indication of a lot of complex knowledge that the child has already understood about learning to read. So when a child picks up a storybook and opens it and tells you a story from memory, using the pages and the illustrations as guide, that tells you that this child understands very important ideas about literacy. Among them would be that reading is meaningful, that books are sources of knowledge and entertainment and wisdom and fun. And then part of the highlights of this stage would be this child will be able to know what the names of the letters are just by looking at them. They will be able to recognize how their names look like and sometimes even print it out with a writing implement and a piece of paper or your wall. And then this child would know how to use books, how to use pencils, and how to use paper. So all of these are important knowledge about literacy that the child will be able to use as the child moves into the the later stages of development. So in terms of understanding children who will be, let's say, moving, okay, you have a 7-year-old child, and this child um, has been um, has been identified by teachers or guidance counselors. This child has difficulties and then may not be able to read well. Then we can be able to look at this child's experiences within this span of time if those experiences were made available to this child. Because, you know, a child who will have very limited experiences with literacy and language around this time of 6 months to 6 years, may be limited in terms of language, may be limited in terms of comprehension, may be limited in terms of readiness to learn letters, may be limited also in terms of understanding a concept, the concept of story. So all of those things will be important to us, especially those of us who will be teaching at grade 1. Ano ba yung baon ng batang ito? Di ba? Pagdating sa iyo, sa klase mo at grade 1, especially those who do not get to go to preschool. Kids in the public school who may not have a preschool experience. So this can explain why some children would be more ready for formal literacy instruction and some will not be as ready. Then in terms of intervention, one way to help out a child like this is to bring or give him or her those experiences that might have been left out within these crucial years of development. So that's stage 0. Moving into stage 1, which is initial reading and decoding. So I need to unpack these two terms side by side. So reading is the broader term. Reading is the broader term because that will entail this processing of visual symbols so that meaning can be derived. Now, decoding is a smaller term. It's a smaller term, but it's a more precise term. And that is that ability to be able to look at a set of symbols and then be able to translate the visual symbol into another set of symbols, which would be a set of oral symbols. So that is decoding. So when you're able to sound out a letter and sound out the letters together to be able to say a word, whether it's a real word or a made-up word, so that is decoding. So stage one is the beginning of formal reading, formal instruction, or formal learning of reading. So this is when a child gets to school, be taught systematically how to read. So when a child becomes successful at this stage of reading, the highlights would be they would know the relationship of letters and sounds, and then understand what that relationship is for, and also understand that that relationship is dependable. That relationship is stable, is dependable. Once I know the sound of a letter, I can read. I can read that sound anywhere else, most of the time in different parts of different words. Um, they should be able to read simple words in Filipino or in English, depending on where the child is. Be able to read words that will not require letter sound correspondence, and then will have the skill to sound out one syllable words. Okay, or for Filipino, kasama na yung dalawang salita, may dalawang pantig, di ba? Okay, so now, there's now a big difference between what was expected at stage 0 and what was expected and what is being expected at stage 1. For stage 0, because a lot of that is informal, because a lot of that is at home, a lot of that would be dealing with bigger chunks of meaning, like reading an entire story, laughing at a joke, writing your name, writing a grocery list. So a lot of that literacy experience will be broad, and then they will not be sequential, and they will not be systematic. And then because of that combination of characteristics of learning literacy in that context, children within this stage have not yet developed that idea that there is some accuracy involved, that there is some accuracy required for being able to read in a particular language. And that is what is demanded of stage 1. At stage 1, wala kang choice. Pag sinabing letter B, ang tunog niyan ay B. Hindi siya, it's not up to you. All right? So that is a huge part of the transition that children will have to negotiate. So when you have a child who will be beginning to learn at stage 1, so you can expect that that would be one of those things that the child will have to struggle with. A lot of children will manage this struggle well. Some children won't. So that's one thing that you need to remember about the reading difficulties that will be happening at stage 1. That will be a major transition happening for children, especially those who do not go to, weren't able to go to preschool, where learning of literacy was systematic and sequential. Another thing is when the child is at or should be at stage 1, but it's having difficulty with stage 1, that difficulty might be coming from a lack of readiness that context or experiences from stage 0 could have provided. Okay, how does that happen? When a child is read stories every day or very often, the child will have this huge bank of words, of meaning, and of sounds and letters. So having that huge bank of knowledge about words and letters and sounds will make it easy for students to absorb what's going to be taught at stage 1. So if you have a child who has very limited literacy experience for stage 0, will have very little to use when the child gets to stage 1. So it's going to be a good idea for a child who should be at stage 1 but is struggling with the expectations of stage 1 to be given learning experiences that this child should have had while the child was at stage 0. So if I have a grade 1 child and is struggling with learning to read, one of the things that I will do for this child is to read this child as often as I can. And then to tell this child's parents, read to your child as often as you can. Your child would need all that bank of language knowledge to use so that when I teach your child to recognize letters, meron siyang huhugutin. Okay? So again, we have these stages of development to understand children who will develop typically or normally, I hate that word, normally, but there will be children who will have struggles, and then this framework of the stages of development can give us that reference point to fully understand, or at least understand sufficiently, the kind of difficulty that this child might be having. All right, then the child successfully completes stage 1 and moves into stage 2. Remember, at stage 1, so that's initial engagement with the letter sound correspondences, building the knowledge that there are letters and they have sounds, and you use them to read, and the correspondence is stable. So you spend like a year or more than a year learning all those letters and sounds. You begin with simple correspondence of letters and sounds, isang letter, isang sound, or a single consonant and a single sound, a single vowel and a single sound. But this will have to expand, okay? Stage 2, it's about that. It's about the expansion of the knowledge of the letter sound correspondence to include other correspondences that are more complex. In Filipino, ito yung mga diptongo tulad ng iu, aw, oy. Tapos sa Ingles, meron din tayong vowel combinations and then also the combinations of consonants. Now, what should also happen for stage 2 is for the reading to become quicker, more accurate, and then less demanding of effort, or it has to be fluent. So the highlights of this stage would be they are able to read simple stories because they have more sight words that they can automatically recognize. There are a lot more regularly spelled words or phonetically regular words that they can read quickly. So they can manage reading short, simple stories and be able to read them fluently and be able to immediately understand these stories. Now, so see the complexity of reading. You need to be able to read words well. You need to be able to read them fluently. You need to be able to understand them. See how the previous stages are all building up to later stages of development. And, limitations in earlier stages will cause difficulties in later stages. So that's also a way for teachers to think about children and their current difficulties, so we know what else to provide as the child learns with us. Okay. Now, the second set of transition, stage 1, stage 2. So you have a child at stage 1 who successfully learns letter sound correspondences of basic correspondences like single letter, single sound. They can read words in the list very fluently, very quickly, and very accurately. But somehow, when they get to a later stage, they struggle with reading, and the struggle is no longer at the level of words, but will be at the level of phrases, at the level of sentences. So a lot of things can cause that. One would be phonics instruction has not been done correctly after grade 1. Magaling yung teacher ng grade 1, tapos biglang hindi magaling yung teacher ng grade 2. So parang kulang ngayon yung kulang tuloy yung alam niya, di ba, about combinations of complex letters and sounds. Or kulang din yung instruction in terms of helping children read not just words in the list, but also to read sentences, to read short paragraphs, and then some modeling of how reading should happen, that it should be reading in phrases and not in single words, so that meaning naturally develops. So you look at a child who should be at stage 2 but is struggling with the expectations of stage 2, and then you see, balikan natin yung stage 1. Ano yung mga stage 1 requirements na kaya niyang gawin? Ito yung kaya niyang gawin. Tumigil siya sa single short vowels. So ibig sabihin, to help a child who is trying to meet the challenges of stage 2, we now start teaching this child specifically the things that he does not know. And then, so a good assessment will tell us what the child does not know. And then with a good assessment, we are able to develop lessons more accurately to address the needs of a specific child. So this is a major transition stage, moving from stage 1 to stage 2. Okay, and then sometimes even when you are in stage 2, you will consider, ano bang alam ng batang ito about stories, and then how are stories told. Baka kulang din siya doon, kaya din siya hindi maka-build ng fluency. So baka mahaba pala yung history niya of limited literacy learning experiences, not just from stage 1 but can even be starting with stage 0. Na kulang pala, o kulang yung language, kulang yung vocabulary. So lahat ng yon kailangan natin pag-isipan sa pag-intindi natin sa isang bata. Alright. Okay, so natulungan yung bata. Halimbawa, may isang bata nag-move from one grade level to the next, and then lahat ng teacher nila nag-attend ng seminar na to. So meron silang ganung paghahanda para sa anong pangangailangan ng bata. So nakatapos siya ng stage 2. So you have a child who is fluent, who reads words accurately, who has a good sense of story, who has sufficient vocabulary, who has good oral language, and now steps into age 9. Okay, so age 9 sa Pilipinas, ano yan, grade 4, no? Mga grade 3, grade 4. Tutungtong siya dyan. Ano ngayon ang sinasabi ni Jean Scholl about expectations at this stage? Now, with all these fluency that you have, your proficiency with reading that you have after all those years of learning, stage 0, stage 1, stage 2, and then you completed or you met the expectations of all those 3 earlier stages, what should you be capable of doing when you enter stage 3? At stage 3, you are so good at reading that when you're given a story, even when you're given a text, whether it's a story or an informational text for science, when you're given text, you're gonna look at the text, you're gonna start reading it, and then after you read it, you're gonna tell yourself, this is what I learned from it. And then all of that can happen independently for as long as the text is appropriate to the child. So what does it mean? The child now uses reading as a real tool for learning new things. So there is no longer that much concern with being able to read words accurately. Not that reading words accurately is important, but what I mean here is from the point of view of the child, he no longer sees the task of reading the words a difficult one. So it's an easy task for this child to say the words correctly, to read it fluently, to read it with expression and intonation, and correct phrasing. So does not have to worry about all those things. And then that frees the child's mind to focus on the meaning of what he's trying to read. So at this point, the child is able to read to learn. Okay. However, there is a slight limitation, and the limitation there is can only manage one point of view at a time. So at this point, we'll be able to read straightforward text talking about, let's say, amphibians, And then after that, we'll learn about amphibians. It's going to be difficult for this child to read a text about amphibians written by two people having opposite views about the value of amphibians in the environment. One will say that amphibians are necessary for balance, and the other one will say, no, they're not as necessary. And then, so that can be confusing for a child at this stage. Masyado pa siyang advanced, no? For that particular stage in a child's life and in terms of reading development. So, what is the transition here? Remember, stage 3, so they're moving from stage 2. So, at stage 2, they're building the fluency skills. They're building the literacy skills that will prepare them for the next stage, which is using the reading for learning and not anymore be so concerned with saying the words correctly because you have managed that. So when you have a child at stage 3, the expectation is this child should be able to comprehend independently, and this particular child isn't. Then one of the first things that we look for, tingnan muna natin kung how fluent is this child. No? Gaano ba siya ka-fluent? Gaano ba kaganda siya magbasa? Pag pinagbasa ko ba siya ng isang text na bagay sa kanya, pag pinakinggan ko yon, masasabi ko na, ay, para siya nagsasalita. Kasi kung para siya nagsasalita, fluent, no? Meron siyang quality. The reading has the quality of speech. So, ay, maganda siyang pakinggan, no? Pwede siyang maging lector. So, maganda siyang pakinggan, ibig sabihin, alam mo na nagre-register sa utak niya yung kanyang binabasa. Kasi naiintindihan niya kung nakakatakot yung binabasa niya, maririnig mo yung takot in the reading. Kung nakakatawa yung binabasa niya, maririnig mo yung humor in the reading. So, yun ang inaasahan at stage 3. Pero pag hindi niya yung kayang gawin, kung nagbasa siya ay putol-putol, then ibig sabihin nun, yung expectation of the previous stage was not mastered. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, hindi talaga siya that this child will not progress with the current stage unless the previous expectations will be mastered or will be managed successfully. Okay? So, yun ang titingnan mong transition. One of the other things that you have to look for, kapag na-check mo na yung fluency, check mo naman yung individual reading of words. Baka the reason why he cannot be fluent is because there are certain letter patterns that this child cannot read. So, in terms of providing solutions, find out what those patterns are and teach them to the child. Develop fluency systematically. Teach it directly. And then maybe when there's enough teaching happening for building of fluency and accurate word reading, then check comprehension again. If comprehension dramatically improves for stage 3, then that was the problem. But if naging fluent na siya, pero may problem pa rin sa comprehension, then there might be another problem happening together with it. So that will be another layer of intervention for the child. All right, so before we move on to the next stage, I need to remind you that this stage is long. All right, 9 to 13 years of age, or about 4 or 5 years. So it takes that long to be able to read and manage and do reading meaningfully across a broad range of text. Okay. All right, then graduate na siya, no? Graduate na siya sa stage 3, moving into stage 4, and then some reading specialists would argue na kapag nakatungtong ka ng stage 4, okay ka na. No, parang hindi ligtas ka na from being reading disabled or hindi ka na struggling reader. Parang kaya mo nang maging successful, no, sa mundo. Doing, tasks that will help you earn money. Parang gano'n. So, pwede ka na magtrabaho. Kumbaga. So, at stage 4, you bring with you that proficiency for reading that allows you to read text and understand it. Now, you take it a step further when you step into stage 4. And that step further is that ability to manage different points of view. Okay, na you will be able to understand what you're reading from the perspective of the person who wrote it. And then be able to judge the validity of that information and then match that information with other information from the same text. So that is, complex higher order thinking. That pag nagbasa ka ng isang halimbawa nagbukas ka ng Facebook tapos nabasa mo itong bagay, isang balita na bago mo siya i-share, bago mo i-share sa mga katropa mo, pag-iisipan mo muna, tama ba 'tong sinasabi nito? 'Di ba? I-check ko muna yung source. Parang kapani-paniwala ba ito? 'Di ba? Tapos kasi ito yung sabi ng isang writer, ito yung sabi ng kabilang writer, ano ngayon ang sabi mo? So that ability to see those ideas like they're separate from each other, and then you're able to see how can they be talking about the same thing, and then so what's your take in it? So at stage 4, because you're coming from reading a wide range of material from expository and the narrative, there's a variety of viewpoints and you are able to manage those viewpoints. Okay, so the transition is from stage 3, which is, I can read and understand from one point of view. Now I can do, as I move forward, I can do multiple points of view. So this is when you have children at high school. They're very good readers. And then, nagkakaproblema halimbawa sa pagbasa ng medyo mataas-taas na literature. Kasi hindi ganun ka-direct to the point yung writer. Okay? So, meron siyang pinanggagalingan. Merong epekto yung konteksto niya dun sa kanyang storytelling. So, minsan, you have a narrator who you cannot trust. Di ba? Kasi hindi siya trustworthy as a storyteller. So, yung successful at stage 4 can detect that, can detect the inconsistency of the narration because that reader has sophisticated skills that kaya niyang i-identify yung all those separate ideas going on at the same time. Now, it can be difficult for somebody who has only managed to do stage 3. So the nature of the intervention here, hindi siya technically intervention, is more of an enrichment. Then maybe help this child isolate ideas and then chart these ideas and then compare these ideas graphically. So ma-manage niya yung separateness of the points of view. Okay? And then, ito na talaga yung pag narating mo to, wala ka ng problema sa literacy. This is where we all should be because we're all professionals here in this room. We are teachers, so that means that we are able to use literacy, our ability to read and write, to gain knowledge for ourselves, to transform that knowledge, and to share that knowledge. So the kind of interaction happening here is not a typical teacher to student engagement, but it's similar to, you have a research advisor. You have a research advisor, and then you are helping somebody put together his or her dissertation. So the management in the transition here would be, there's multiple points of view, and then how do you now use that so that you can construct and reconstruct knowledge? All right. Tama-tama lang, 40 minutes. Okay. Now, so here are the stages again, from stage 0 to stage 5. And as we said, it's a very useful framework for us to understand normal reading development, and also to understand children who might be struggling. As a synthesis, in terms of the stages themselves, the stages are not set in stone in terms of the age. So a child can be 10 years old and still be at stage 2. However, although it's not, the age assignment is not permanent or set in stone, the stages will happen along those sequence. Next, a child's success or failure in meeting the challenges of each stage depends on the adequacy of the formal and informal literacy experiences. And then the formal and the informal literacy experiences are just as important. Children develop difficulties with learning to read because they are not able to make a transition. To make a transition, children need to gain specific set of knowledge about language and literacy and the skills to use them across a broad range of texts. And children who do not make the transition can be helped by making available to them the appropriate reading intervention. This is my reference. There's only one book, a very important book that all teachers or all libraries should have. I have this book by Jean Scholl. Very old book, but very useful. Thank you very much. If you have questions, we'll engage with your questions later. And then if you have, more complex, more difficult questions, this is my email. And then I need to present this because, this format was made by a group of people who was generous enough to share it with people like us. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Teacher Vic, for that
You're
very
welcome.
informative talk. So now we are going to open our question and answer portion. Are you ready, Teach? Okay.
Sure.
So we have many questions to, asking about discrepancy, no, Teach. So they're saying that the kid is at this age or grade level, but that yung characteristics nila do not correspond to that particular age or grade level. So what do they do if that's the case, and how can they help transition so that they can go back to the parang the particular stage or level that they should be in?
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah. Hindi nga siya Hindi nga siya parang ano ba to? Yeah. One first thing that teachers should be clear about, balikan natin yung stages, no? Kung halimbawa hindi nyo man nakuha yung pangalan, si Jean Scholl yung pangalan niya, stages of reading development, i-google mo, ang dami mong resources na makikita. Pagkatapos, theoretical yung framework. Hindi naman siya yung tipong parang hindi katulad ng mga stages of development na alam ng pedya, no, na parang malinaw kasi yung mga stages na yon and they are universal. So a lot of things can affect how children will go through the different stages. Some of them will be caused by language differences. Some will be caused by cultural differences because literacy is a cultural practice. But the usefulness of the framework is that nilinaw niya kasi kung ano yung kung ano yung parang kailangan ma-master ng bata. So, iba-ibang components of reading. So, ang useful siguro is have that framework and then build your understanding of each stage as your experiences teach you. Anong sinasabi sa iyo ng experiences mo about anong characteristic ng batang Pinoy in terms of being a reader at a particular stage. Kung classroom teacher ka, makikita mo yung similarities ng kayang gawin ng mga bata sa isang given age group. Now, kung meron kang ganong pag-document ng characteristics ng bata, malalaman mo kung ano yung kung ano yung pinapakita ng karamihan na kaya nilang gawin at ano yung hindi nagagawa ng iilan at alin yung nilalampasan ng iilan. So, as you grow older in the profession, magkakaroon ka ngayon ng pagkakakilala doon sa katangian ng mga batang mambabasa sa iba-ibang stages ng kanilang buhay. Kung halimbawa nasa grade school ka, makikita mo yan. Kung nasa high school ka, makikita mo yan. No? Nasa ano yun eh, nasa pagsusulat talaga ng pagdo-document, pag-case study ng mga bata. So, gamitin mo siya, gamitin mo lang itong bilang framework. And then, you may begin using this loosely until you have enough information with a bigger number of kids. So that masasabi mo na, ay parang hindi niya nagagawa ito. Itong particular na batang to, mukhang malayo talaga siya. Then, malalaman mo ngayon, ano yung mga bagay na hindi niya kayang gawin. No, bilang isang mambabasa, as a reader, what are those things that he finds so difficult to do on his own? So that's a start. No, that's a start. And then work with your colleagues. Do the same thing. Try to document characteristics of particular age groups in terms of literacy, and then maybe then you will be able to have, you know, a more complete set of localized knowledge about the stages that Filipino children go through in terms of, you know, reading development. That's a very long answer. I hope some of that was able to, you know, fit to your question.
Yes,
But
teach.
yeah,
So, yes, teach. So, in relation to what you said, teach, with regard to plotting the levels, one question is there an assessment that they can use, like a standardized assessment that would be able to test mastery per level? And in relation to that, teach, how do they know if a child already has a reading disability, and on what level do you usually have that kind of inkling that, okay, this kid has a reading disability and would require perhaps a formal assessment?
okay. If you're a child in the public school system, it can be a good idea to rely on Phil Erie. So far, that is as close to what we can have in terms of having a standardized way, as long as the data was, you know, gathered correctly, no, pang reliable yung data na nakuha mo through Phil Erie. So that's one. If you are a teacher in a private school system, and then you can safely say that this child has, you know, okay English proficiency, towards, you have this good sense that mukha namang first language niya yung English kasi the way he reasons out, he uses English naturally. When that is the case, then you can use available standardized tests in English. So, kanya-kanyang research na lang kung ano yung mahahanap mo na standard test, kasi there are a few of us specialists here in Chorus who do assessment, and then we have our own tests. We have our own preferences. So, mas magandang idea siguro na do your own research about what kind of tests will be good. Now, if it's a standard test from America, alam mo na ang comparison of abilities was done using American children. Kapag bibili ka ng test galing sa US, ay sa UK, syempre, British children. So, ano yun, no? Maraming considerations. So, ang unang consideration doon ay anong klaseng test. Ibig sabihin, hindi siya yung brand ng test or specific test, but anong gusto mong alamin. So, kung ikaw ay teacher ng reading, dapat familiar na sa'yo yung components of reading. Kasi siya yung pinagdigdikan ng DepEd na may components kasi ang reading di ba? May iba-iba siyang strands. So, tingnan mo yung strands. Alin doon yung importante sa'yo. Pagkatapos, gamitin mo si Google, humanap ka ng reading test, and then ilagay mo end strand. Halimbawa, reading test, reading comprehension, or vocabulary, or fluency, or word reading, or spelling. So, doon mo makikita. Doon mo mabibuild, no? Kung seryoso kang i-build mo yung yung test, either for your school or for your own personal practice, then that's the way to go.
Okay, teach. How about strategies, teacher, for encouraging readers to read longer text, especially the ones in grade 7 and up?
Ah,
What strategies can you recommend daw po?
simula niyan, pumili ka ng libro na karapat-dapat na basahin. Okay? Yung tipong kaaya-ayang basahin at hindi sa point of view ng isang 48-year-old na teacher na tulad mo, kundi point of view ng grade 7 na batang babasa. So that's the very first, important strategy. Pick a book that a child would want to read. Na hindi dahil sinabi ng teacher mo nung grade 7 ka na maganda tong librong to, tapos 45 years later, yung pa rin ang librong binababasa mo. So, i-expand mo naman. Mag-interview ka ng mga grade 7, no? Tapos sabihin mo, ano yung mga gusto yung basahin? Tungkol saan? Tapos hanapin mo yung libro, tapos basahin mo. Tapos, very first strategy is when you find that winning book, make sure hindi lang isa, kasi damihan mo na, mga 3 o 4. Tapos ita-try out mo talaga siya. Pa-try out mo siya sa mga bata. Kung masisiyahan ba sila doon sa librong yon, maiintriga ba sila, no? Paano mo malalaman? Basahin mo yung first chapter aloud to the students. Tapos pag hindi ka hinikaban ng mga bata at nanatili sila nakatingin sa'yo, malamang okay yung libro. Tapos doon mo na simulan i-build yung pagtuturo mo ng reading using that book. Tapos kung dahil reading teacher ka o language teacher ka, alam mo yung mga kailangang i-discuss sa isang libro, di ba? Meron kang narrative elements, tapos meron kang comprehension skills. So, gamitin mo lahat yon. Pero huwag mong ituro na sabay-sabay. No? So, pa isa-isa, di ba? So, makikita mo, nagturo ka halimbawa, understanding character traits, tapos binasa mo isang magandang libro, tapos naintindihan nila yung character. So, okay to. So, ibig sabihin, okay yung strategy mo. Tapos merong isang bata na sablay yung sagot sa tanong about character traits. Then that tells you that what you did in terms of teaching, understanding characters was not learned by that child when you taught it in a group setup. So cornerin mo siya, ituro mo ulit yung skill. Tapos pag nag-gets niya, ibig sabihin kailangan pala siyang one-on-one para maturuan niya yung skill na yon. Pero one-on-one mo na, hindi pa rin natuto, pili ka na ibang strategy. No? Gumamit ka ng organizer, mag-chart kayo ng character traits, get it directly from the book, turuin mo siya na ano ba yung sources ng information in reading, in understanding a character, what the character says, what the character does, what other characters say about this character, what does the invisible narrator saying about this character, then gamitin mo yon, anak, para maintindihan mo yung character traits. So, ganon. So, what am I saying? Importante ang choice of the material. Importante yung solid sa language teacher. Ano ba yung knowledge and skills that you need to be able to understand a book or a story or a novel. And then teach those individual skills as clearly as you can, as systematically as you can, and then see what was the effect of that instruction.
Teacher Tin, thank you very much for the questions, and I'd like to thank the participants also for asking very, very good questions. And I'd like to happily inform everybody that we can answer your questions some more, because in the other topics to be discussed in the series, we will be talking about assessments for reading. That's actually the next topic in this series. And then we'll talk about the influence of we'll also talk about how reading intervention affects the lives of children who undergo therapy in reading and in learning. And then we'll talk about specific strategies also that address decoding difficulties, spelling difficulties, writing difficulties, comprehension, language, and behavior, and even attention. Teacher Red, what are the other topics pa in the series? Did I miss anything else in the topics?
You have a very good memory, Miman.
Yeah, great. So, you guys, I invite you to continue watching the chorus page in Facebook because we will announce the other topics in the series, and it will be equally interesting and equally relevant to our lives as parents and as teachers also. So I know teacher Christine, we're going to show them a video and give them more information about the other things in the series, correct?
We have a video for our next speaker for next week. The registration for the next talk will start on Monday, August 3. And your certificates for this particular lecture will be given a week after. You may continue to direct your questions to our Cory's Facebook page. And now we will close by having our video. Teacher Ting.
Teacher Vic, we
Yes,
would like to
teach.
thank you again. Teacher Vic, thank
Thank
you
you.
again for being very detailed, but managing the time. No, only 40 minutes of that, but very fruitful. We have a lot of messages in our chat rooms thanking you for this effort and saying how very useful it is. And Teacher Vic, any last words for our participants?
Be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself in this time. I am so stressed with all the things that I have to do because our school will open on Monday. And then I have been a teacher for like 27 years. And I always am ready first day of school. It is the first time in my life that I will say I'm not ready for day one. So
Right,
I have
right.
been preparing every day.
Right. So many
So be
new
kind to
things.
yourself.
Yeah, yes. Right. And so with that, we hope that through these series, now we're gonna be able to help you warm up for the new school year and get your questions also set. We know that we expect that there will be more questions as to how we implement things in this new normal that we have. And we look forward to uh, being with you in the next series, next couple of talks, and answer your questions some more. So thank you again for your participation and thank you again for the questions. Teacher Christine, please introduce our video.
Have you ever encountered children who had a hard time with reading, yet felt unsure how best to help them? Essentially, it begins with an understanding of what the early signs of reading difficulties are, as well as having an understanding of the role reading assessment plays in the instruction of struggling readers. To that end, I'd like to invite you to join me next week, August 8, for Lecture 2 of the Chorus webinar series, where I will discuss the what, why, and how of reading assessment. Early identification and targeted instruction, after all, is key to the trajectory of reading success. This is Teacher Rina advocating for the literacy of all types of learners. August 8, save the date.
There.
Have
So
you
we
ever
hope to
encountered
see you
children?
next Saturday, same time, 5 to 6 p.m. Yeah, Teacher Red, do you have additional reminders to our viewers and participants?
If you want to be part of the group picture now, you may turn on your videos.
Correct. Yay! Ang saya niyan. Sige, group picture tayo.
Everybody, show your face.
Yay! Hi, everyone. We have people
Hi.
as far away as possible. Yeah.
Okay, we
Thank
still
you.
have 165 people in the room. Cheese, everyone. Cheese for 30 minutes. Cheese. We have 7 screens. Cheese. Keep smiling. Hello, everyone. Keep smiling. Don't stop smiling.
Smile lang ng smile.
Turn on your video. Number 4. Cheese.
Cheese.
Some people are still off pa rin yung iba.
Alright. So, Teacher Ed, how do they register for the next talk, which is on reading assessments?
I'm admitting somebody. She wants to be part of the picture. Yes, we will roll out the Google form on Monday. Cheese!
All right, so everyone, please keep an eye out on the chorus page. We're gonna make announcements on the chorus page regarding the registration for the next seminar. So that's Saturday, 5 o'clock, 5 to 6, 6:30 at the most.
Reminder lang po, even if you take the box with all lectures, you still have to register if you want to be part of Zoom. Salamat!
Hey, thank you, everyone. We recorded your
you.
questions in the chat, so we hope to be able to get back to you if there were questions that we missed. We hope to email it to you or to type it up in our course Facebook page. Thank you again, everyone. God bless. Teacher Vic, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Chorus, thank
you.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. You may now leave the meeting. Thank you. And chorus members can stay. Thank you. Thank you. See you next week.
To the viewers on
Bye.
Facebook.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Maida, you raised your hand. Is there anything we can help you with? Oh, no more. All right. Teacher Fides, we can help the participants exit the room, no?
Yes.
Yes.
Paano?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ah.
Move.